Clinton.
Okay. And Ron, what did you do at college?
I was a counselor here.
Okay. And what was your first year at MCC?
My first year was 1969.
How did you hear about the college?
Well, that's interesting. An interesting story, really. I applied for a job at Middlesex Community College, and the dean there was Ed Vader. And the fellow who was working here, Tony Burns, had just taken the job that I was applying for down there. And he said, we just hired a fellow for this job, but I know there's an opening at Manchester Community College. I can call him up there and tell him you'd be interested, and you can go up there tomorrow and interview me. So I said, oh, yeah, I'd love that. And so it turns out his brother was Bob Vader, who worked here, but also the guy that was interviewing me was Jack Gannon. Now, Jack Gannon was the dean of students at Southern when I was a student there. And I used to date his secretary's daughter. So when I knew him, and she always had good things to say about me, I said, oh, I've got it made here, because Jack knows me. I said, I hope he doesn't remember almost throwing me out of school.
Why would Gannon have to almost throw you out of school down at Southern?
Well, I was in an apartment with four other guys, and the landlady was kind of a nut, and we were making too much noise, and she stomped her cane on the ceiling upstairs, and the plaster fell down and she kind of blamed us for it. And so she said we were too rowdy, and so she had called the school, because the school kind of sanctioned all the apartments in those days. And so we got called into the office there. I was an innocent victim.
So when you came for the interview, did Jack Gannon remember you?
Oh, yes. Yeah, he remembered me.
And he still gave you the job?
Yeah. I hope he remembers good things. So after you're hired, where were you physically located? In Hartford Road. They had closed off a closet, and that was my office. And it drove me crazy, because before I went to college, I was in the military, and I was in communications intelligence, and I never worked in a building with any windows. So it was, I was really looking for a window, and they put me in this closet without a window. I said, oh, no, this is terrible. So, but that's what they had there at that time.
Now, did you have to share the closet with them?
No, it was my very own closet. It was long and narrow, and I was at one end.
What, 1969, peak of the Vietnam War. So what was the campus like back then?
Well, it was sort of scattered. The president's office was a farmhouse on Keeney Street, and Admissions was a three-family house on East Center Street. We worked out of the high school a lot at night, and we had to work till 10 o'clock at night over at the high school, and that's where we had our classes. And then the Hartford Road building was mostly administration, but there were classrooms there also. And it was just the beginning of the protesting, I think. And so students were kind of rambunctious at that time. And they would protest things here and there. And one day we closed the campus right at the end of the semester, quite a little bit before it ended. I don't know.
It's probably the year that the National Guard came onto Kent State.
Yes. Oh, yeah.
Spring of 70.
Yeah, it was right around then. So it was a transition for me, because I'd just gotten out of college and I was working, so I was administration, but I was sympathetic with the students too, and their plight. So it was.
Were there a lot of veterans on campus as students?
Not a lot at that time, but after that there were.
Okay. Yeah. Now, who are some of the either the faculty or staff that you worked with in the late 60s or early 70s who made an impression on you?
Well, Jim Tatro was one. He was, when I went to my first faculty meeting, he was a parliamentarian, and he knew everything about Robert's Rules of Order, and they would always refer to him to clarify the way something was done or whether somebody could vote or not, and so forth. And I was kind of impressed with that, and he was a nice guy. And my friend John Gustafson, who became my roommate, who taught in the English department, and we became friends, and he's a very colorful individual. And let's see, Dean Godey, Jack Gannon, and some of the other counselors. Well, Bill Graver came on later, and
Who's the president in '69?
Lowe.
Did you have much
Dr. Lowe.
interaction with him?
I didn't have a lot of interaction with him. No, he was, of course, he was removed from the campus also, so he was over on Keeney Street. So, yeah, but he ran, very a meeting where he allowed everybody to have a say, and then he would do what he wanted. But he always listened to everybody's opinions and so forth, which was pretty good because we didn't. After that, we didn't really have too many presidents who were that way.
Now, your job was it primarily to advise students on what courses
Well,
to
when I
select?
first got the job, it was split in half. I was the director of testing and research because that's my background, and then I would counsel students around the results of the CGP, college placement test, and so I got into the counseling, and then as the college grew, and it was doubling in size almost every year, and they said, we're going to go full time with this testing and research job and placement. So do you want that, or do you want the counseling portion? And at that time, I really liked the counseling portion, so I went back to school and I got a 6th year in psychological services. And I opted for that. But when I did that, I also picked up placement. So I was the sort of placement officer to help students get jobs and develop resumes and things like that. So I had those two. And then that expanded, and they hired a full-time person to do placement. I opted again for the counseling.
So you were kind of in the first couple of years of your career when the East Campus was built, was that?
Yes.
So did you move into the East Campus
Yes.
as soon as it?
Yeah, when we moved into the administration building where the president's office was, and admissions and registrar and counseling were all at one building.
So how did that change things in terms of your work or just the environment?
Well, we sort of did away with the high school at that point, so it wasn't going that across town to the high school and borrowing facilities. So we had our own facilities and everything. So it felt a little bit more cohesive, and you could reach people easier. All the faculty offices were in faculty east and west and like that. So it was nice and I had a window. So I enjoyed that.
Do you remember any funny stories or funny incidents from some of those early years?
Well, I remember coming up to get the job, and I was on Main Street over there, and I had to go to the Hartford Road building, and I stopped at a gas station, and I said, I'm looking for the community college, and the guy didn't know where it was. I said, I'm in real trouble. I don't know what kind of a place this is I'm going to work, but the guy, it's around the corner. He didn't know where it was. So I found it, and community colleges were really in their young stage at that point, so it was a new concept for a lot of people.
Now, you were also here when they moved to the Low Building in the 80s, is that?
Yes.
And did you move from the East Campus up,
Yes.
up to there?
Yeah.
So
To the
what
end
did you
of that.
think? I mean, if you think back over like a 15-year span from 1969 through the East Campus, through the Low Building,
Mm-hmm.
how do you look at that progression?
Oh, well, I was on some of the planning committees, so it was a lot of fun having an input. The problem was that the original design, which had a lot of thought put into it for the traffic patterns of students, there was a main corridor that go all the way down the middle of the building. And when the legislator got a hold of it, they squashed the building and ruined all those plans for traffic patterns. So we were in counseling, we were supposed to be right off of that, but after they did that, we were sort of on the end there where the traffic was light. So that wasn't our design as far as that went. So, but that was for financial reasons. They said we can build a smaller building.
During your career at MCC, what were some of the major changes that you witnessed?
I don't know. I think it just went along and grew, I think, in some very positive ways. One of the good things about the college was the people that they hired. Almost all the people stay here for a long time, and the reason is because it's an exciting place to be. There are changes. You get a chance to have a voice on so many committees, and people are very cooperative. You know, work with them easily, and the main focus was to help students. So I think the changes have been, but more toward when I was leaving, the changes were that we had to do more with less, and so we had to deal with students in groups more than individually, and technology came in, the computers and so forth, and we were registering. Students could register online, so they didn't see anybody and make a contact. And my feeling was that it would be easier for them to drop out because they had no connection with anybody. And so I guess it's unfortunate. I don't know what you do about that. You have to have more money to hire more people, but that was a change that I thought was not good in that. So.
If you look back at your career, is there some accomplishment that you're most proud of?
Oh, I can't think of any offhand, just my everyday activities that I really enjoyed. I just enjoyed coming to work every day. I enjoyed the people I worked with. I enjoyed the students most of all, and the complexity of the different issues they had, and being able to make a difference. I always wanted to be a counselor. I didn't want to be anything else. I didn't want to be a dean or anything like that, so I had no aspirations like that. I just enjoyed it. I guess I feel the accomplishment that I did have that seems to have an impact was to try to defend the counseling component of the union, because what happened was when we used to have faculty rank, and when we went to the union, we sort of split off and had counselor rank 1, 2, 3, and 4. And when they went into negotiations, they gave faculty different benefits and raises that they didn't give to the counselors. And over a period of years, it became a substantial gap. And I tried to do something about that, and I think I had an impact. Also, it was difficult for counselors to get a sabbatical because we were 12-month, and they couldn't easily replace us because of the money. And that was sort of an unfair system. So I was able to address those two items, and I think that they made some changes as a result of that.
If you were talking to someone who just got hired to start working at the college, what advice would you give that person?
I don't know today. I think I'm out of touch with the way things are running, so I'm not sure what I would give them, except that I always had the philosophy that you're here for a purpose, and that is to help students. And so any way that you can do that, that should be your focus, more so than your own, how you're doing yourself. And I said, that will come automatically if you do that. And so that would be the advice I would give them, is try to listen, try to be helpful, supportive.
Is there anything else you want to add or discuss?
No, nothing comes to my mind. I probably have 100 things after I walk out.
Gentlemen?
Ron, you just did personal counseling?
No, there are 3 aspects to counseling: personal counseling, academic advisement, and career development. Okay. And we all did all of those, okay, as well as served on college committees and so forth.
I remember on social activities too.
Yeah. So. Yeah.
Well, let me pick up on something that Chuck mentioned.
Mm-hmm.
When Steve Casano was here, he talked about a very vibrant fraternity life back in the late 60s with fraternity houses on Bolton Lake.
Yeah.
Does that?
Oh, there's a couple things I could mention that are kind of humorous. Jack Gannon wanted to get off of being an advisor to the fraternity, so he gave it to me. And so I became the advisor to the fraternity and to one of the fraternities, and they had a fraternity house over on in Manchester, and the president of the fraternity was a veteran, and we became good friends since then. Gary Dorsey, he became a counselor, as a matter of fact, at Norwalk, and then moved to Hartford. And but at any rate, they decided to induct me as a member, and so it was this formal induction ceremony, and they had this table with the candles on it and everything. And you went and you kneeled down at this table, and they did these procedures and so forth. And so I was there, it's all solemn and everything. And I went to get up, and I put my hands on the table and tipped the 2 candles over, and we were in total darkness. And so everybody was scrambling around trying to find a match, trying to find the candles, trying to look for the light switch. And they finally got it all back on, and all the guys were standing in a row, and they had their blazers on, and I had to walk back and go through the whole line, and they were all, all trying to stop from laughing. It was so it was a funny story, and they never let me forget that. And they had a reunion not too long ago that I attended, which was pretty good. So, yeah, there was another funny story, but I can't remember what it was.
Think of it. Was the fraternity related?
No, I don't think so.
Probably a John Gustafson story.
Oh, yeah, there was a lot of those.
There were some characters, weren't there?
Yeah. I can tell you a story about John if you like.
Sure.
Well, we lived together out at Amsden Lake in this little cottage, and the heat unit was underneath the place. And when it rained really hard, the water came up, put out the pilot light on the heat. So we had to wait for the water to recede to go down and light the pilot and get more heat again. At any rate, I used to try to take care of John a little bit because he was a little forgetful. And so I had caught this bluefish. And I had some friends over. We had this big feast and everything, and I had this extra bluefish left over, and it was baked, So I left a note for John. John, there's a bluefish in the oven for you. It's all baked, and I left it there. And I went away for the weekend. I figured John would be home later anyway. John decided not to come home that weekend. He had other plans. So when he did come home, it was Sunday night, and he walked into the place, and it reeked of smelly old dead fish. And when he opened the oven, he immediately regurgitated it. And then he had to try and get rid of this thing. So he was a little unpredictable. I thought he was coming home, and he didn't. He just decided not to. So, but there are other things like that. He would borrow my jacket. And a week later, I go to use my jacket, and I find a ham sandwich in a pocket, kind of moldy. So we had a lot of fun together.
I think I can remember sometimes when that pilot light went out, he would walk down the street to some
Yes.
house and try to get warm for a while.
Exactly. Andy lived down the street. He moved into Jack LaForte's, who used to be the director of student activities. Andy took that position, and he also took his house. And so we had to come down to Andy's a lot. Right. So,
Good. That's great.
Yep.
Some good stories.
yeah.
Really.
I didn't know. Sorry. Talk
Okay, wait
about.
just a second.
Okay.
Okay. Well,
This would tie in with your question about the 60s and the protests and so forth. So in those days, I had to do administrative coverage, which meant I had to be in the Lowell building till 10 o'clock at night, till all classes were over, and be on call as an administrator to answer questions or field all things in the office there. So I said again, well, what's this administrative coverage? What do I have to do? He says, nothing ever happens. Don't worry about it. It's really quiet at night, especially around 10 o'clock. You just close up the building and so forth. Oh, okay. Don't you know we had a bomb scare? I called Mary, got the call, and says, there's a bomb in the building. I said, oh, no, what do I do now? So I had to evacuate the whole building. And then the next day when getting out, I said, what do you mean nothing ever happens? It happened the first night I was on administrative coverage. So I got my indoctrination early.
Thank you.